again, this is the battles of Lexington and Concord that occurred April 18th and April 19th in 1774. All right, basically, what has to happen, as you guys know, is the British have to leave their barracks in Boston, travel this road to go to Lexington, where they're going to try to pick up Hancock and Adams and any other rebel leader that they can find. Then they're going to continue on. There's about 700 of them. They're going to continue on to Concord, where they've received intelligence that there's going to be a huge stockpile of gunpowder, shot, and possibly some cannon. And that's their goal. Now what happens is Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith takes off at midnight. The idea is, if they take off at midnight, they'll reach Lexington at dawn. And in that manner, they can avoid any conflict. The British regulars don't want a conflict. The British generals don't want a conflict. And so they're going to go in there, grab these rebels, and then grab the ammunition, and there's never going to be a war. That's the goal. Well, what happens is Francis Smith takes off with about 700 of his men, and they march down this road. What they didn't realize was that the Massachusetts militia was warned. And what's going to happen, you're going to have three primary guys who are going to try to bring the message that the British are coming to Lexington and to Concord. And what's going to happen is you're going to have Paul Revere is going to slip, which is really pretty cool. He's going to row a boat past British ships, which was illegal. You weren't supposed to be out there at that time of the night. And then he's going to jump on a horse and he's going to ride this way. He ends up making it to Lexington. He warns the people of Lexington. Then you're going to have Prescott and Dawes, two other riders, are going to take off from this direction, and they're going to be able to warn Lexington. The problem is, they're all going to be stopped right about here by a British unit that was set out early. And what's going to happen is Paul Revere is going to be taken into custody. Dawes is going to be thrown from his horse eventually, but he's going to escape. Prescott makes it through. Prescott is able to warn Concord. So the issue is, the militia knows that the British are coming. The Minutemen are going to be prepared. And what they've also done is they've sent word out to other communities all over the place that this is where the British are. Now it's our chance to defend ourselves. All right, so what happens is the British troops follow this route and they get to Lexington. When they arrive at Lexington, they are met by about 77 Minutemen. And they're led by a guy named John Parker. The Minutemen are standing in the green. They are not blocking the road. This is important. If you're blocking the road with a guy with a gun, there's guaranteed to be a conflict. And so they put them on the green, which is a big open space in the middle of the village, but they have their weapons. The British come in and they can't believe that these guys had the audacity to stand up to them with weapons. The problem is, you have hundreds of British soldiers, arguably some of the best trained soldiers in the world at the time, up against about 70 regular people with their own regular weapons that they provided themselves. Yet they're standing there defending Lexington. We don't 100% know what happened and why they began shooting. I have an idea, and I honestly think that when the British arrived and the Americans faced them, well, they weren't Americans yet, but you get the idea, that when the major yelled out, "Lay down your arms, you damned rebels," and the rebels didn't lay down their arms, a shot did occur. There's a possibility that it was actually multiple shots, because at the same time, a prisoner had just been released by the British. And this prisoner was told to walk. But he ran, and they shot at him. They killed him. That may have been the shots that were heard. You've got guys that are scared, that are facing each other, and all of a sudden a gun goes off. We know that at that point, the British regulars began firing. And immediately some of the Minutemen were hit. But it was such a confused situation that a lot of the Minutemen believed that the British were just shooting gunpowder. They hadn't fully loaded their weapons. And so it's going to make a lot of smoke and noise, but it's not going to hurt anybody. Until they looked around and they saw individuals who were obviously hit. And this is a real problem. About 8 guys went down here. The rest of the militia either scattered or fired into the British, but to very little effect. Then they ran. Because it's at that point that the British soldiers, with orders or without orders, we're still not 100% sure, charged into the militia with bayonets. Now here's an issue. The British soldiers had bayonets at the end of their guns, meaning they could shoot and still use the gun as a weapon. A bayonet is like a knife at the end of your gun. The British were well trained in using bayonets. The British bayonet charge was very scary. None of the militia had bayonets. So when they fired their weapons, they had a very intricate club until they could reload. The British could fire and then advance. And this is what broke up Parker's men. Now, luckily for the American Revolution, the leaders of the revolution, the leaders of the rebellion, had already escaped. They knew what was happening. So they were able to leave. But now, with Lexington cleared, the British troops continued on to Concord. But it wasn't this time that the British recognized, and Smith in particular, he sent word back that they needed reinforcements. And so what's going to happen is Brigadier General Hugh Percy is going to, at the head of about 500 men, he's going to come in to try to help, just in case he's needed. Doesn't look like he's going to be needed because the rebels have already dispersed. But the shot heard around the world occurred. The militia fired on the king's soldiers. This is huge. So the rest of the soldiers travel this way, and they get to Concord. But when they get to Concord and they break into multiple groups, one group heads toward the North Bridge, about 100 men. The rest of them hang out kind of in Concord and head towards the South Bridge. So they've broken up their troops in the face of a potential enemy, which is something you want to be a little bit leery of. When they went to the North Bridge, 100 British regulars were met near the bridge by 400 militia. All of a sudden, tables are turned, and the British regulars are now outnumbered. This must have been a very scary situation for the British regulars. And what happens is, when they got to the bridge, there was a mistake in command. And the British formed up improperly. When they were facing a bridge, instead of forming up in a line like this, so they could have a mass firepower, they lined up in a column like this. So only the guys in the front could really fire. So the Americans came up across the bridge, and there was an exchange of fire, but then the Americans opened up and were starting to flank the British, or fire at them from the sides. This caused the British to retreat. So they went back this way to meet with the rest of the British soldiers. What begins to happen now is from all over the place, militia members from various villages converge on the land near Lexington and Concord. Many of them. The British begin to recognize this is an untenable situation. We didn't find the guys we were looking for. We found some weapons and a couple of cannon, but it's not worth it. Let's strategically withdraw. We won't call it a retreat. We've fulfilled our mission. Let's head back. It's going to be a long march. It's more than 20 miles. And so they begin to head back. They've already suffered a few casualties, but so have the militia. As they move along the road, they find themselves attacked from behind stone walls. Individuals are shooting at them from behind trees. And when the British attempt to respond, they turn in unison and they fire volleys into the woods. But by this point, the militia has ducked. They're hiding. And what the militiamen recognize is these guys walking in their red uniforms along the roads make real easy targets. And you can shoot and then duck. You don't have to stand up to them. And it's more effective this way. That's what they begin to do. And so as the British are moving in this direction, trying to get home, the militia is attacking them constantly from the sides. And the British pick up their pace. And whenever they get into a battle, what the British do is they double time, which basically means they start to jog. And the militiamen in the woods can't keep up with this jog because these guys are on a road and the militiamen are in the woods. So the militiamen get left behind. And for a little while, the British are safe until the next group of militia arrives and shoots at them. And this is what continues to happen this whole route back. The British can't seem to effectively engage the militia and still head home at the same time. And the militia just lies in wait and then ambushes. This would have been a horrific massacre had Percy's army not reached them when they got about here in a very strategic area. Percy was able to put some of his cannon on some high ground. And when the British forces reached this area, bedraggled, tired, running out of ammunition, hungry, when they got here, Percy was able to fire a couple of cannon rounds over the heads of the militia to keep the militia's heads down, allowing the British then to continue their retreat. But at least now it was a much more orderly retreat. They continued, but they continued to be attacked the entire way home to Boston. Some of them made it here, some of them made it to Boston, but because of the geography of the land areas that were their bases, what ends up happening is if they went here, the militia could go here, right? And they're trapped. If they went here, the militia can go here, and they're trapped. And what ends up happening, in part because of this, is you have a siege in Boston, and the British find themselves in a really bad situation. Not only has a shooting war started, now their Declaration of Independence hasn't even occurred yet, but they're already shooting at each other. And what the British recognize is that these colonials, these militiamen, will fight back. And they are very good. And they don't follow the rules of war. They don't wear uniforms. They don't stand in a line. They don't have officers who understand the rules of engagement. And man, they shoot and duck. Cut that out. So, the end result of this battle itself, eventually, of the 1,500 British involved, 73 of them were killed, and 53 went missing. They don't know where they went. Either they were killed and lost, or they said, forget this, I really don't like to be a British soldier anymore, and they just ran away. For the Massachusetts militia, of almost 4,000 people who eventually showed up, 4,000. They lost 49 killed. This was unbelievable for the British to suffer this kind of a tactical and strategic loss. One of the most powerful armies in the world fighting a non-army was unheard of. Yeah.
Wait, only 49 were left
No. Only 49 were killed.
from the British?
Nope. 73 of the British were killed and about 53 ended up missing. And from the Massachusetts militia, only 49 were killed. Now still, that's 49 people and that's 73 people. Those are, every single one of those people is a soldier. Every single one of those people felt the pain, and every single one of those people had a family. Right, so that's still a huge deal. What the British realize is they're actually going to have a real battle on their hands if they're not careful. They still believed it was possible to not have a war. Some of the colonists believed that it was still possible to not have a war. But that wasn't going to happen. Yeah?
What was the king's reaction to this failure?
Well, what's going to happen is a month later when the king heard about it, he did not hear about it from his side. He heard about it from people that were sympathetic to the colonial side. Why? Because they put the message on a fast ship. Literally, it got to England 10 days earlier than the official British note about the battle. And so when Gage talked about this battle, he tried to make it look as if it was not a big thing. But the militia's version made it look as if the British suffered a horrific defeat. And so the king is going to respond in a manner that is, he was incensed. He couldn't believe that anyone would fire on the king's men. And he also realized that this was a big deal. This wasn't something that he could let other people deal with. He was also much more likely to send troops to deal with this issue. Because he's like, now I get it. Gage had asked for more troops. I guess I better send them. So it's going to cause an escalation in the conflict. Okay. Other questions? Please.
So basically, because the colonials were gloating, they kind of made it harder for themselves?
Well, they made it harder for there to not be a conflict. Right? There's going to be a conflict. It was, and here's the deal. While war is a horrific thing, America, come on, all right? That's a pretty big deal. All right, thank you for your attention, guys. You did an excellent job. We only have about 2 minutes left in class. Talk amongst yourselves. Thank you.